not settling. It's the
Yeah.
reason why I've ended relationships, changed jobs, and done all these
Mm.
things. It's just the power of not settling and the power of just making sure we're constantly opening, as I describe it, opening new doors, because you don't know what's behind
Mm.
it. And it could be broom covered, but it could be a complete change in your life. And I think, if we're looking for more purpose and meaning, you're not going to do it by doing the same thing again and again, by
Yeah.
sticking in a job, and you're not going to get that thunderbolt of inspiration by just doing the same thing.
Welcome to Be Human, Sarah.
Hi, Jennah-louise. Thanks for having me.
So, Sarah, where I would love to start is all the way back in 2005. You expressed the sentence, "I can't cope." And in your beautiful book, Paddle the Nile, you expressed that it was one of the most liberating moments of your life. Can you please tell me more about this moment?
Yeah, it had been a little work building. Like, those moments generally don't happen overnight. And I was working in a bank, and we'd gone through a very stressful time within the organization, or certainly the area I was working in. There'd been some fraudulent trading, and the regulator had come in and had given us a whole list of things that we needed to fix, and we were penalized with sort of capital constraints and things until they were all fixed. So we had senior management just driving us super, super hard. So it was very stressful. The regulator was due to come in pretty soon. And then in the background, on top of that, I had a long-term relationship and I was engaged, but I just got to the point of going, no, I can't do this anymore. This isn't right. It wasn't going to be happy ever after. There weren't any specific things, but it was just, I knew it wasn't for the long term. So I'd recently finished that, which was possibly one of the hardest things I've ever done. Like, just seeing someone I care for so much be so hurt, and sort of coming to that decision. So this was all this kind of storm, brewing, and I just got to that almost breaking point where I was literally kind of like, my hands were shaking, and I went into my boss's office, and I just said, I can't cope. And it was this immediate feeling of sort of relief, of like, oh, it's okay. We had the conversation, and it wasn't, the world kept spinning. It's like, wow, it turns out I'm not the center of the universe.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, I think a lot of us have been
you build
there.
yourself up, you lose all perspective.
Yeah.
You kind of have this feeling of like, if I don't keep going, like, everything's going to fall to pieces, and then it doesn't. And then you just get told, Sarah, take some time off. If you need to go to the doctor, go to the doctor. Go get some. If you need help, need help. If you just need time, take the time. And the job's still there for me. I don't get. It was just this really liberating moment. Like, it's okay to say that. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, powerful moment. And I think a lot of us can resonate with that, is like when we're having those really hard crucible moments in our life, it can feel like we are the center of the universe. And if we just take a moment to pause and look after ourselves, that we understand now that the world doesn't fall apart and it continues on, is, I think, such a beautiful lesson. And I want to kind of continue this theme of crucible moments and kind of fast forward to 2016, because I know that this was a really big moment in your life as well. New Year's Day, and you're kind of reflecting on having worked in corporate for about 20 years. And as you share, it's sort of this 48 weeks on, 4 weeks off kind of pattern that you have. And you start thinking there has to be more to life. Can you share more about your reflections during this period?
Yeah, I mean, it was just that feeling of being on the hamster wheel, and one that I'd been on for a long time. I'd got off temporarily, and I'd gone and, tried to follow my passion for sport and fitness, and became a PT. That wasn't really me. So then I got sucked back into banking. The golden handcuffs, got me again. It's a very, it pays
easy to
well.
fall back.
It is. It's easy to go back to, and it was quite nice having the structure and routine. And even if it was raining, I'd still get paid, and I didn't have to go chase clients. It was like wow, this is so much easier than being a
Yeah.
PT. So it was great. And I'd say, maybe it was a strength, but definitely not a passion. And I
Mm.
just come out of a very difficult friendship, quite a toxic friendship that had finished. Someone I'd been dating that had come to an end. I'd come out of a bout of sort of depression, so it had been quite another sort of tricky year. But I also looked in front of me, and it's like I've got this blank canvas. I can do whatever I want, and I think it can be also be very easy to say I can do what I want, but I just don't know what it is. And I just made that commitment of I have to change something. Like you brought up that thought of just another 20 years, until I retire, of just doing this, living this ordinary kind of this life that to me seemed ordinary, and it's not to say it's, for a lot of people it works brilliantly, but for me, I think I haven't wanted the ordinary, and I just never managed to find what that was. And I think I just felt pressured and followed the societal kind of expectations in a lot of ways, and was just feeling like I contorted myself into a shape that wasn't really me. It's like putting on a dress that's just not the right size, and you just don't feel comfortable. You're just
The
like,
sleeves are a little too puffy.
it's just not really me.
Yeah.
And so then I made this real commitment of like, right, I've got this blank canvas now. There are no more excuses. Let's try and find, what I want to do, and to bring
Mm.
more purpose and meaning into my life, for things that really, trying to find that thing that really brings me alive.
I feel like, again, a lot of us can resonate with this moment in our life, and I can certainly personally do it. I remember it wasn't what I knew that I wanted to do. It's sort of a similar moment in my life, but it was speaking to what you are about, not like knowing what I don't want to do. And that was enough to kind of start having me think and expand my mind. How is it that you came to decide that you wanted to paddle the Nile?
So there were a few things I did. Like I started off doing a bit more kind of soul searching, and I did
Mm-hmm.
Danielle Laporte's book, The Desire Map. And I
Mm.
really like it because it's about unpacking how do you want to feel, and
Yeah.
using that as I would describe it, it's like that's your why, and then your passions are the how. So it's like, how do I want to feel? What's going to make me feel like that? So that kind of then gave me a sort of a lens to put things through. And then I just spent more time, I was just looking on the internet and watching different, I don't know, YouTube videos, blah, blah, blah. And I came across a couple of people who'd gone on some expeditions, but they weren't what I'd always seen as your classic sort of adventurers and explorers, like those people, the Bear Grylls types who've been literally, using an ice axe since they could walk, or they're ex-military or something like that. I've read so many books about adventurers, and I always used to think, oh, I'd love to, my husband or partner to be the adventurer. And it was like, then I suddenly realized it's like, no, I want to be the adventurer. And suddenly I could see these people, I could see what I wanted to be. And I could see that, yeah, okay, this is open to anyone. And it's
Wow.
like, wow. So it's like,
Yeah.
and that was it. It's like, I'm going on an expedition, and I got into paddling, kayaking, or surf ski paddling, and ocean ski paddling through the surf club. And I just knew it had to be something paddling related, and looked at various things, and then saw that no woman had done a source to sea human powered descent to the Nile, and my ego really liked the idea of it being a first.
Yeah.
I think that wasn't
There's
the
nothing
real
wrong with
reason for
that.
doing it. Otherwise, I would never have got down there. My ego's, it's strong, but it's not that strong. And it was just, it was bizarre. Like when I came up with the idea, it was a visceral response, and I couldn't
Mm.
fully, and I still can't fully put into words like why it just felt so right. And it's like, of course this isn't a career forever, and it's like and I was like, no, it doesn't have to be. I'm relatively comfortable with uncertainty and change and things like that, so it's like, no, but this is it for now, and who knows
Mm.
where this will take me. Maybe nowhere, maybe it'll just be a great experience.
Mm.
But it was, yeah, it was immediately, brought that excitement, and that sort of the future, and a future that excited me. And
Mm.
that's what I've really been looking for.
And speaking about the ego not being enough to sort of get you down what you have experienced, which we'll get into. Coming back to your why, what is it that you came to know, the feelings that you wanted to feel in your life?
That feeling of adventure, of challenge, of freedom, of strength. Those were some of the things that really kind of came up. The need for, for change and variety. I really need that. I can be a little bit sensation seeking at times, and that's a whole different sort of path to go down. But yeah, those are some of the things that really kind of came up. And looking for excitement, the need for excitement.
Yeah, I can relate to that experience. I'm very similar in that way. And I felt like when I was in corporate, it felt like my days were soul sucking. And it was just like that monotony of doing the same thing day in, day out with not much of a sense of purpose or anything. I genuinely felt like I was dying because of that lack of growth and expansion that you speak to. Coming into deciding to paddle the Nile, it's a big thing being the first woman to do this as a leader of an expedition. Did you experience self-doubt? And if so, how did you move through that and overcome that?
There was so much self-doubt. And,
yeah.
because I try and look back and I was backing myself on, in banking, I was a risk and project manager. So those are two fairly fundamental things to, making this happen. So I knew my ability to do the research and I spent so much, it took me 2 years to get to the start line, talking to, and there also aren't that many people who've done it. There was a team who had gone, initially they did from Uganda, which was initially the source that was thought of was Lake Victoria, to the end, rafting, and then part by engine. And there was a woman on that team, so she'd become like the first woman to do any kind of expedition down the Nile. And I spoke to one of the guys who was on that, who'd then gone on to do from the source that I went from, back to sort of Lake Victoria. And so I got to talk to them. So kind of like, I felt like I knew the things that needed to be done, but of course I had no proof that I could do this. And there was so much uncertainty, like there's so much outside of my control with this, whether it's everything from trying to get visas and approvals to building a team to what the conditions are going to be like. And the only way I could really manage it was just to keep taking steps forward, because it's like distraction for a 2-year-old. When you go, okay, well, I'm just going to get to this point, and then I'm going to get to this point, get to this point. When you're doing, it takes away from fears, and it takes away from self-doubt. That's what I found. It was, action was the greatest antidote.
And as you shared, it took 2 years of preparation, which is certainly a pretty decent level of commitment before you've even so-called started. When you get into Africa just before this whole expedition is starting, how are you feeling? What's going through your mind? Are you experiencing 100% conviction, or is there still sort of those little thoughts of self-doubt popping up?
Oh, there were definitely some self-doubt still popping out. I was watching some of the videos the other day, and that I took some of my vlogs, because I'm just sort of rewriting my keynote, and it's like, no, I want to put more video into it, and looking through some of them. And one of them was me about to come in. We were doing our descent into Entebbe, into Uganda. And, it was just that sort of the reality of like, wow, this is really happening.
Yeah.
And then I still had a lot to organize. Like, I still didn't have a team. I'd come to Africa, so it's like I still didn't have all the approvals, and I hadn't been able to get a team. So it was still all of this uncertainty, and you get these little steps forward, and then there'll be maybe a couple of steps backwards, and so it still took, when I got there, about 3 weeks, I think, until we were actually kind of underway. But I was actually quite chuffed, because I plucked a date like 6 months earlier. Everyone had been saying, when do you start? When do you start? When do you start? And I sort of broadly thought, okay, October. And I think the date I pulled out was the 18th of October. And it was actually the 26th of October that we kicked off from. We left Ginger, so I'd engaged some Ugandan rafting guides. I managed to, I was being lent some rafting gear by Nile River Explorers, and we were sort of on our way. And it was just like, that's quite ridiculous. I've managed to be literally sort of just like a week over, as far as I was concerned, that was on time. And even then, getting to the start, there were just so many problems. Like, the car kept breaking. We went through, I don't know how many it was in the end, something like 4 different cars and 5 drivers, something ridiculous. It was just like, I wasn't sure if the universe was saying, don't do this,
right.
Sarah, or if it was that final test.
How bad do you want it?
How much do you want this? And I'm like, I'm going with the latter.
Yeah.
I put so much effort into this. I'm not giving up now. I haven't persevered and done all the recce's and everything else that got into it. It's like, no, I have to walk to the start. We're gonna bloody get
it. I absolutely love it, because I feel like, stories like this just come out of parts of Africa, don't they? It's just part of the experience of going there. Talk to me about your relationship with, let's call just Africa as a continent, but I know that in your book you describe it as sort of this seeping into your bones kind of energy. And something that I really loved about what you did as well is that you were really inclined to include the locals in your experience as much as possible. And it just felt like you were really comfortable in sort of immersing yourself. Can you speak more to that?
Yeah, Africa has been on my, somewhat, I always wanted to go to as a kid, because my mum went out to South Africa before I was born. That's where she met my father. And she spent a couple of years out there. And I've just always been fascinated by the stories and the photos. And it had always had this huge draw before I even got there. And then I'd had a few trips there, and there was just something about it that I loved, the rawness and the beauty and the harshness at the same time, and the people. And, I'd gone and done more holidays there. I'd done recce's, one to Uganda, one to Sudan and Egypt, and every time I just fell in love with it a bit more. And yeah, everyone I met was great. And I really wanted to get some more, as you said, as you pointed out, into the culture. And so I very deliberately had local people with me. So it was Ugandan rafting guides for Rwanda, Tanzania, Uganda, and then with Sudanese paddlers for Sudan, and an Egyptian guide through Egypt. And I think it really changed the experience I got, had it been alternatively, me and some, a group of friends, and maybe a local with us or something. I think some of the experiences I got to have of being invited into people's homes, I think I don't know, I haven't done it differently, but I do think it was very different. And just getting to spend time with local people. It's a bit like when you go traveling on your own, you talk to people more, and you get to know people. If you travel with a partner or a friend, like, you're not spending as much time necessarily with talking to other people. So, it also, created challenges as well, but it was definitely worthwhile. And I'm really glad I did it that way. And I was so blessed with the people who came and joined me. Like, it was just ridiculous how lucky I was with the people who, jumped on board and put so much effort into sort of helping me make my dream come true.
Yeah, I know in your book you certainly do acknowledge that it was a team effort to sort of succeed in everything that you set out to do. And where I would love to sort of go now is day one. What was it like sort of putting first paddle to water?
It was an amazing moment. Like, it was, as we come, because we'd had all these car problems, and then we were finally on our way, after an overnight down to the river. We'd already gone into the source, walked in, and then we were going the next day to where we could put the raft in, so it needed to be kind of wide enough. And as we came down, up until that point, there was all this like, have I got everything? Is there anything I've forgotten? It's like with the Rolodex, the wine is just going round and round and round and round and round. And then I saw the river, and it kind of just all melted away. So it's like, I'm here. And that it's just the way's going to appear. It's just, we're just going to get on the water and we're just going to go, and we're just going to take this one day at a time. And it was amazing. We had so many locals watching us set up.
Wow.
It was Umuganda Day, which is I can't remember which Saturday, is it the last Saturday of the month, where everyone in Rwanda stops and they do community projects. So it could be cleaning up, digging ditches, helping to build schools and things like that. So there were a lot of people around. And they said that watching us counted as Umuganda Day, which I think felt like a bit of a stretch. But it was great. We had this audience as we sort of put the raft together, pumped it up, tied everything on, lowered it on, and then got underway. And yeah, that moment, I had my paddle and I put it in the water, and it was just like, I've done it, and it really did feel like if it was just that one day, it was enough, because it was and someone had said to me, it's like, Sarah, just get into the start will be huge, will be amazing. Just get into that point. And that was something I had experiencing and sort of doing adventures, and I could see what he meant, and that it was amazing. It was like, and we got through, we had all the kids like running along the river banks next to us for like kilometers.
Wow.
It was beautiful. Quite an experience.
Yeah, I'm there with you. It sounds beautiful. And so obviously, I mean, this is a beautiful moment to share, but obviously in something like this, there are certainly moments of fear that come up. I'd love to sort of speak to you, we can sort of laugh now about some of the experiences that you had, but certainly in the moment they were quite scary. Can you share a little bit more about sort of your experiences with animals, particularly, let's say, hippos, and just sort of how they were such a sort of big part of your adventure?
So when I'd gone through, done my risk assessment, and part of that, automatically you work out what are the things I was really scared about. There were quite a few things, and some of the main ones were some of the animals that we were potentially going to meet. So you mentioned hippos, crocs. I was very nervous about the big white water, so the rapids. Those are probably, a few of the things that really did worry me. And crocs weren't an issue. I mean, we saw crocs, but we didn't have an issue with them. The other two absolutely faced those. So day 6, like where we come down to near Kigali, the capital of Rwanda, as we were making our way down the river, and we'd woken up and I'd heard a hippo making its way upstream, and they've got a very distinctive noise. And I was like, oh, I really didn't want to get into hippo territory so soon. And so we got in the raft, and there was just that sort of air of tension because we knew what was ahead of us, and the river wasn't super wide. What you normally do when you're in hippo territory is use your paddle to slap the surface of the water, because they spend their time underwater sleeping and just come up to grab a breath. But when they hear something, then they'll pop up and see what it is. The idea is then you can see where they are and you can just avoid them. And that was fine to begin with. We went past a small pod of hippos and they were pretty chill. But then we were coming up and the river was going to do this sort of left and then a right bend, and the bank's about a meter high, so you couldn't see what was ahead of you. And as we came up to sort of go to the left, we could see in the corner a baby popped up, and I literally just got the words out of like, oh, where's mum? Like, we'd stopped paddling, but obviously the river's still taking us, and she pops up on the right. We've gone between her and her baby. You don't have to
it's not ideal.
Too much. Sort of like, everyone goes, oh, as soon as you said that, it was like, oh, it's like, people don't know much about, there's an animal, what they do in responses, but when it's, mother and baby, oh, you messed up. Like, oh, big time. So we're quickly on the paddles and the oars. So the way the boat's set up is we have a frame on it and a set of oars. So one of the guys would be standing there and forward rowing, and then 2 of us up the front paddling, and then one person would be taking a time out at the back. There was Paolo at the time. He leapt to the front quite athletically. We've got this hippo coming for us. I didn't see it. What the boys said, like, she tried to flip us. She put her head under and tried to flip us. But you've got, with the frame, 3 people, plastic barrels filled with food. She couldn't. So then she sort of had another think about it, and I just suddenly felt this tug, and I looked behind me, and she'd bitten into the back of the raft. It's just like this primal fear. Like I felt fear before, but not that real primal. And it was like this white fear, but there was still some rational thought in my brain. Was like, well, there's still, a couple of meters of raft between me and her, and Koa.
One needs to go down before you.
Oh my, no, over. Yes,
sorry,
Koa. So luckily she let go, and I don't know whether it was the air coming out or something like that, or the pop that she would have felt, or that she realized that she was now quite a long way away from her baby. But she backed off, which then allowed us to get to the riverbank, jump out, watch, and sort of go, okay, right, she's backed off a little bit more. So then we unloaded everything, pulled the raft out, and the boys patched it, and then we were getting ready to get back on. But that was, it's one thing to know that you're afraid of something, to then face it like that, and to then know I've got to face that probably so many more times. I've never felt particularly courageous, but I really do feel like I was tapping into some courage or insanity to get back on the river. But what was amazing is one of the guys, the other guy, Peter, was just really good at coming up with solutions. Because I'm like, well, the experts have said this is what you do. You slap the water and that's it. So I'm very compliant. I'm like, well, that's what we do. So if that doesn't work, well, it's kind of like tough. And then Peter goes, okay, what we'll do next time we get to a Hippo is we'll get off the raft, get on the opposite riverbank, and tow the raft past. And it's like, oh, that's genius. And it was just like, well, of course, that's a much better way of doing. You've got to adapt, because it's the solution generally. It doesn't mean it's the only way. Sometimes you've got to have that kind of blue sky thinking of like, we've got to think out of the box here and challenge, just because it's the way it's always been done. And literally within an hour, we came across a Hippo that put on this massive psychotic display. But we were able to get off and do that. We couldn't always. When we dealt with them, we still had a few more scary experiences. But nothing nowhere near as bad as that particular one, and none of them quite so close to losing our lives.
It's full on. And I mean, in partnership with this, to my understanding, there was also sort of risk management around potential kidnappings. Like, there was a lot of uncertainty throughout this expedition, other than simply paddling the thousands and thousands of kilometers. As you sort of shared, you've got your team that's helping you problem solve. What else kind of helped you to face those uncertainties day in, day out?
It was just the why of wanting it so much. It was, I think, the power of a strong why and that determination to do something kept me going. And it kind of created, it's almost like that, having a coat of armor to deflect against all the, the pain and on all of those things. And that's what really helped keep me going. And then having the right people kind of around me, having that team, I had Dave, who I was checking in with every day. So it's having someone that I could really trust to bounce ideas off with. It's like, this is what the decision I'm thinking of making. What do you think? And him going, yeah, good call. So just having those trusted sources, like having the right team around you, combined with that really strong why, can just get you through. Well, for me, that's what got me through, dealing with the months of uncertainty and we had a run of just like one thing after another, which culminated with the being arrested and detained in Burundi, and I haven't got, you're so close to it, you haven't got that objective view of like, should I be stopping this or not? And it's like, I knew Dave, if I should stop, Dave would absolutely tell me, and it was like, no, we're going to keep going, and we're going to keep going until I can't.
And you mentioned that you got arrested and detained in Burundi, which is a massive experience in itself. And I really loved this part of your book because obviously there's a lot of fear and uncertainty in an experience, but sort of within it, it was a bit of excitement and adventure for you. Can you share more about an experience like that of being arrested and detained in a country in Africa?
Yeah, so the Burundi experience, I think I massively underestimated sort of the seriousness of the situation, but I did find it kind of exciting. I think I genuinely didn't feel at any point that we were in physically, in real danger. It was just going to take time to sort out. And, we were told to row across the lake, which took us into Burundi. It's the army that told us to row over after we'd been a fisherman and sort of encouraged us effectively across the unmarked border. And then the army were like, no, it's okay. But then the police wanted to make a big deal of it. So then the next thing we're having to unpack everything and load it onto their ute and get sort of taken through the countryside. And I felt like I was almost like being paraded like some kind of catch, because we were on the outside of these benches on the outside of the back of the ute. And then, stopping on the way, and I was like, right, we need to get changed. Can you please let us get changed? Because I knew they'd put me in a room on my own, and I could get another message out to Dave to let him know what was happening. And then take the questioning, and then we weren't put into jail. We were put into a very basic hotel, which I had to pay for. And then it was like, in the middle of the night, like crawling out onto the balcony to put a call in today and to know what's going on. And it was a really interesting experience. I think I just never, at no point did I really feel that we were in danger. It was pretty tense at the point where we were being driven to the border to be released, because I just felt that they were looking for excuses to try and keep us. They really did not want to let us go. And thank you, David, been putting pressure on with people to, in higher places to then put pressure on. So it was pretty tense, and I was, probably more worried for the guys than as much as for me, because I, brought them into this situation. I felt I had a duty of care to them. So I was definitely very relieved that we did get released, and yes, we were very happy once we sort of were back across the border into Rwanda, and it was high-fiving all around. But it was just interesting, all the risk plans, bang, it just gone into place, and it just showed, this is why risk management is so important, and why you can end up taking bigger risks, because you've got all the plans in place to manage things if, the proverbial hits the fan. So it was, yeah.
And you went into this knowing that death was a possibility. When you're actually there, experiencing near-death experiences or unsafe experiences, did you still have the same level of conviction before you left? Or were you there kind of thinking, is this trip worth something that I could potentially die for?
Yeah, I mean, like you say, I accepted it going into it, and it is different when the reality, it goes from a theoretical exercise to the reality that you're facing. And I definitely, I had to check back in with myself of like, okay, do I genuinely still want to continue, or do I stop? And there were, multiple times I had that sort of check-in with myself of like, is this worth it? And it just came back with a resounding yes every time. I look back on it now and go, oh my goodness, I was crazy. What was I doing? But it just felt right at the time. There was just, I think, a lot of trusting my gut, and again, going back to, I had a team around me who I knew would pull me up if I was taking unnecessary risks. And because after a period of time, it's hard to trust your gut when you're in those sort of life-threatening situations, or you're extremely tired, or you're extremely stressed, and when there's a lot of emotion in there, it's hard to really go, what's my gut telling me? Because it's like your vision's blurred to it. But no, it was always I never really thought about stopping. It was just checking in to see, does it still feel right?
And it was certainly worth it. You definitely achieved this. We spoke about corporate days that we both resonated with each other on, the unfulfillment, the monotony that comes with it. But obviously, life isn't always these grand adventures. How have you learnt to bring back into your quote unquote everyday life this sense of adventure and of being alive?
There's nothing that compares to being on the big adventures. So I think for me, there's knowing that there's going to be more is definitely part of it. And then, I like the contrast. Like, it doesn't all have to be like, sort of drama and exciting. It's quite nice to then come back and have some structure and routine and waking up in my own bed. And having, there are the other goals that I'm pursuing, and then it's rebuilding the body and getting focused on what's next and taking time to reflect. Like, writing the book about the Nile trip was so valuable, because I think it's really easy that we set ourselves these big goals and we go after them and we achieve them, and then we're like, bang, what's next?
Right.
And we don't, there is so much gold in those things that we've experienced, particularly when things haven't gone to plan. And by going back and having to really unpack it to write the book and then edit it and things like, at the end I share some of my takeaways, and those have changed from what I first wrote to what I published. It changed as everything it gently bubbles to the surface, all the lessons and the learnings, and then you add on top of them, then I did the Murray River, and then I did the cycle ride, and that helps, develop those learnings and add to them. So, I quite like, I couldn't be, full-time adventure, literally going from one to another. It would be exhausting. So it's enough for me to have those things to work towards. And like now I'm training for a big ski paddle race, a week of ski paddle racing, and it's good. I need that, because it's going to be a while before I do another expedition. I've without a goal like that, a physical goal to work towards, I'm not at my best. So having that is I need those goals.
Yeah, I feel like you managed it all so well, because it is a commonality for people that particularly spend years working towards something really big, and then they spend a substantial amount of time doing the thing. And then I remember in your book, you were describing almost this sense of grief after finishing this expedition, because you'd sort of spent so much time and energy in it. And I think you've managed it well, in the sense that you know that it's important to set new goals, but it's also important to provide that experience some space for reflection and integration. And it seems like you've sort of been able to really piece it together in a way that's been quite fulfilling for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really has. And I told myself coming off the back of the other trips that I should do the same, not to write a book, but to do that reflection. And I just haven't done it, but I'm sort of, in a way, I'm doing it through by, re-looking at my, my speaking work and the coaching I'm going to be doing. That's allowing me to then sort of go back and do it. And now I've sort of broken off from corporate. I'm trying to give myself that space to go back and do some of that reflection, because it is so valuable. It really is.
In your book, you describe the expedition as physically demanding, emotionally draining, and mentally enlightening. Now, having sort of given some space to this experience, how has this been mentally enlightening for you?
I think for me, there was just so much of uncovering what I love, what I'm capable of, what I'm passionate about, different perspectives of going on and doing these expeditions, from the countries that I've gone to the perspectives of what I'm capable of, what I enjoy, and that reinforcing that the feeling I've always had of not settling. It's the reason why I've ended relationships, changed jobs, and done all these things. It's just the power of not settling, and the power of just making sure we're constantly opening, as I describe it, opening new doors, because you don't know what's behind it. And it could be broom covered, but it could be a complete change in your life. And I think, if we're all looking for more purpose and meaning, you're not going to do it by doing the same thing again and again, by sticking in that job, and you're not going to get that thunderbolt of inspiration by just doing the same things. And for me, by reading different books and watching different things, and it's like, oh, suddenly, I can see it. And so for me, just that, the desire to sort of keep doing that and trying to, and encourage other people to do the same. Not necessarily go on expeditions down the Nile. Definitely
fights with hippos. What would you say? Because I certainly can really empathize with people that are currently, and it seems to always be in this corporate setting, that just really feel like life's a little dull at the moment. I love the idea that you've shared of being able to keep doors open, and the idea of change a possibility. And also I love about your story is you suggest it's like, you don't have to be Bear Grylls to go out and achieve great things. What is it that you normally say to people that say, hey, I know that there's something more, they relate to that person that you used to be? What is kind of that first step, or the first few steps that they could start considering to take?
I think it's learning to tap into your curiosity and just to do something, do anything, and don't overthink it.
Right.
It doesn't have to be, try new things. I've always wanted to have a go at pottery. Well, just go and do it. Sign up for mentors. Just do it. You've always wanted to have a go at camping. Go and do it. It's just try different things. Like for me, one of the biggest things that really was the sort of a big door opening, which I wasn't expecting, was I became a surf lifesaver. And I was doing it to do a bit of charity work. I'd moved from Melbourne to Sydney. I wanted to meet some people. From that, I got to meet people, and then I got into teaching. So I started teaching the bronze and advanced resource. And then I got into some leadership roles, and then I discovered I got my first board role. I was doing some event organizing, and then got into all these different sports, which got me into paddling, and it's like, you just don't know where things are going to take you. And I just, for anyone who is in that situation, is just do different things. Read a book you wouldn't normally listen to, listen to a podcast you wouldn't normally listen to, watch documentaries, just invigorate the mind and open it up and start to really tap into your curiosity, which I think just gets beaten out of us through, life.
I absolutely love it. And thank you for this wonderful conversation, Sarah. Thank you for your inspiration and for being such a beautiful light.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, Sarah, on a final note, I would love to ask you, what does it mean to you to be human?
So to be human, I think is, part of it is our capacity for compassion and kindness and gratitude, along with our ability to dream and to have goals and to pursue those goals. And then, that all fulfills our need for growth and for autonomy, and then underlying it all is our need for connection, which I think is one of the greatest things. So yeah, I think that's, in a nutshell, would be what it means to be human.